If you're thinking about investing in Russia, there are two words to remember: consumers and commodities. That comes from John Connor, the founder of the Third Millennium Russia Fund. It's up 23% over the past year. He's with us this morning. John, thanks for coming in business with us today. We're talking about oil at 2-year highs, the run up in some of the hard metals as well. Is it that easy of a correlation to say commodities are doing well, therefore the Russian companies will as well?
Well, in the beginning, the Russian stock market was not that correlated to Wall Street, but today it is. And what the FMOC does and what the price of oil is pretty much where the market is. It's mostly foreign investors. The domestic support for the market is not that great. There's very little long-term money in Russia.
So when you say bet on the consumers, it's not the Russian consumers putting their money to work. The retail investor isn't as active.
Well, the economy is growing faster than our own. Not as fast as India or China, but still 40%. I'm a little worried about economic growth next year. Russia had been growing at 6%, and there's some structural rigidities now that have me concerned. But still, the rising middle class is the theme, where it's geographic expansion into underserved markets. Huge retail outlets make Walmart look like a corner drugstore. Some of these huge stores.
Were you surprised though when Walmart for years has been saying we want to get into Russia because of all the promising things you've described, but then they said it's not happening in the near term because they couldn't find a partner there.
Well, IKEA also has had serious problems. There's corruption dealing with local, it's a real estate play. You need a lot of local permits and access and electric hookups and all these things. And there are a lot of substantial retailers in Russia that are in our fund doing very well, and I'm not sure they want to see Walmart in the market.
So perhaps it's a win to some of the names you own. So what are you recommending in that consumer space? Which names?
Well, there's a company called X5, which has had a tremendous year. They're a very big box. And Magnit is a much smaller 7-Eleven type. I mean, they're bigger than, but still smaller boxes. And then Dixie's also done very well. So there are several names that have done extremely well in the retail space.
It's not a name you would imagine to be in Moscow, maybe in Mississippi.
Well, Pepsi just acquired Wimbledon, and they put up that name because it is so familiar to Westerners.
Yeah. Well, with the commodity space and the metals boom there, I mean, at what point do you start taking some reallocation? Because I believe when I looked at the breakdown of your fund, you are mostly invested in oil and commodity space within Russia. That's the biggest part of your allocation.
Well, okay, but the reason we outperform the index is we're underweight Gazprom, and then poor Lukoil just doesn't get the play it deserves. It's a great company, but the multiples very inadequate. So we're much bigger in steel, for example, than the index would be. And the steel companies have been doing extremely well. The export dimension I've mentioned, and also the infrastructure at home. And with the World Cup designation of Russia coming up, there's going to be a lot of additional steel demand for the stadiums and all the stuff they have to, the airports and all the rest of it.
We're back now. John Connor, founder of the Third Millennium Russia Fund, which is up 23% in the last year. John, 17 years now, Russia's been trying to get into the World Trade Organization. Some people said President Obama going there and, dealings with Russia now raise the possibility that entrance may actually happen.
Yes.
Is it going to happen in 2011?
Yeah, I think so. But keep in mind the local oligarchs have been dragging their feet because they have the whole economy divided up amongst themselves.
Right.
But in fact, I think WTO is going to be very important for Russia to get it out into the world and to get the world into Russia more. And I think it's going to work out very well for Russia, but that's not the way the oligarchs see it. So
are you placing bets around that? I mean, are there trades off of that?
Yeah, next year, this coming year, it will happen.
It will happen.
Definitely.
So, but in terms of dislocations that might create with some of these oligarchs you just talked about, are there potential losers here in terms of the companies that you trade?
Sure, but the Indian domestic people were scared to death of joining the WTO, and the foreigners would come in and clean their clocks. And in fact, India has done very well moving out into the world, and I think Russia will as well. But, the status quo is always the easy way to go.
Well, with India, just this week, you had President Medvedev there really trying to restore some trade relationship with that country. How interlinked is Russia with the rest of the BRICS?
Well, China is very, very important to Russia. The demand for Russian steel and fertilizer everything Russia exports goes to South and East Asia, and they're going to have direct links more in oil and gas, and so China is key. Brazil and India. India was historically, pretty close to Russia. That's why India was neutral, and of course, our ally was Pakistan.
It was during the Cold War.
The Indians didn't even sign the non-proliferation and never participated in the NPT regime. So, there's kind of a turnabout here, and this is driving the Pax nuts. But it's important for all of us to be closer to India and Russia to maintain their ties to India. So I think, that's a plus for both of those countries.
Bloomberg ran a story that I thought was really interesting, pointing out that Russia's the first country to offer direct trading of the Chinese currency, the Yuan, outside of China itself, and they're actually increasing the dealing hours for that. Is that something you would trade? Would you try to trade the Yuan via Russia?
No, but on the one extreme, if we lose our reserve currency status, game over for the U.S. On the other extreme, this is just a settlement account, small potatoes, and they both would like to thumb their nose at the U.S. Primacy. Good luck.
This is just symbolic.
If the trade is not balanced, then China's going to, for example, want to do barter because they don't want to sit there holding a surplus of rubles for any length of time. So, but it's a symbolic gesture on their part.
All right, an interesting one, but yeah, symbolic, you said. Well, thank you very much, John, for coming in.